Okay, I'd be a straight up liar if I told you that Jet Set Radio was a part of my childhood growing up. Like, I'm not gonna be going around here saying, oh yeah, I've been a day one fan since Jet Grind Radio. I mean, like, there's no point in saying that. I'm pretty sure I was still learning my ABCs and 1, 2, 3s around that time too. But what I am able to say is that I've always been a huge fan of its art direction and hardcore 90s to early 2000s aesthetic. Heck, I would probably consider Jet Set Radio being one of the most 2000s games you could play. And before I'd even thought of playing it back then, I was for the most part listening to its iconic soundtrack by the funky uncle himself, while also trying to make art that was inspired by the game's style, which could probably be evident in my later works. I don't know why, but for the longest time I've always put off this game and I regret it. Maybe it was because some other shiny new game was probably catching my attention, and it was only up until 2020 during that time when I finally decided to give it a try. So I bought that bad boy on Steam and booted it up right away. When the game booted up and I was being greeted by Professor K's legendary line, you know, Jet Set Radio, with the old but timeless graphics, I knew I was in for a treat. Everything from the menu music playing, humming the bass line, the laid back looking hideout, and the GG's just breaking it down screamed funk and style. Everything was going great. The voice acting, Professor K's mic peaking, I loved it. And it was only up until that moment. Yep, that moment they gave me the ability to control my character. And needless to say, it had me saying stuff like, okay, this doesn't feel that great. Unfortunately, I did close the game and probably moved on to something else like Jump King or something. Okay, no, that's an over exaggeration. But I did play the game for a bit and thought it wasn't for me. I'm dead serious. Maybe I would have loved this game way back then. You know, I probably would have been a lot cooler and probably would have been more successful at life. But at the time, I think I was comparing this to like Tony Hawk or something, which is probably not the mindset to have when getting into the game. I'm pretty sure there's others out there that probably thought the same thing and never touched the game again. And I thought I was gonna be one of those guys. Up until 2023 when I played Bomb Rush Cyberpunk, and that's when my whole idea of the game flipped. To put it into perspective, once I 100% Bomb Rush, I immediately went back to Jet Set Radio to give it a second try, like legit 1 or 2 days after. And long story short, my love for the game actually grew. And the more I started to understand how it plays and how it flows, the more I enjoyed it. After beating that, I went on to finish Future, and now here I am patiently waiting in Shibuya Terminal for this upcoming remake that Sega has cooking up, and I really can't wait. Although I do have my concerns with the new art direction, even though it looks clean, I just hope first and foremost the devs are actually able to bring their vision to life with the technology we have today. I also pray that they take the controls into heavy consideration, because after Bomb Rush Cyberpunk, I can't imagine Sega continuing with the old ones they've had many years ago. And I know for a fact that the newer players interested in trying out the game are gonna review bomb it to heck if that were the case. But this video isn't going to be about what I want in the new Jet Set Radio. I mean, I know we just want the game itself in general. Rather, I just want to celebrate the fact that this IP even exists. There's a reason why this game became a cult classic and why so many resonate with it, including myself. And I just want to share my first experiences with the two games, as well as Bomb Rush Cyberpunk. Okay, this game took me about 2 revisits to truly get into it. I'm not gonna lie, with the second time being after I played Bomb Rush Cyberpunk. So we're talking about a 3-year gap from the first time I actually played it. And it's crazy if you think about it, because I'm coming from this to this. It definitely was jarring at first, coming from these tight / responsive controls to controls that a majority of the newer players would consider janky and floaty. And I don't blame them. They do feel very janky at first. Yep, I said at first, because somewhere along my playthrough of the game, something just clicked. I don't know, maybe listening to Super Brothers for the 70th time unlocked something deep within my core, but eventually I just started to flow and everything started to make sense. And it all started with a wall jump onto the roof in Kogane-cho. That's when I had that oh shoot moment. The hamster wheel started spinning in my head and I just started experimenting for the heck of it. Stuff like, what if I jump from this rail to this rail, then jump the wall wall up here? Or what if I wall jump to rail all the way up to this machine? It felt like at that moment, the game started opening up to me. Opportunities started presenting itself, and the pace just started to feel a little quicker than I initially felt. It felt like one of those moments where once you start memorizing the map layout and which jump you can connect to the next, you get heavily rewarded for it. And of course, you can say the same thing with a lot of other games, but I just had that same feeling when I was playing Super Mario 64 or the older Sonic games. As for the music and art direction, come on, let's be real. It was always the main strength when it came to Jet Set Radio. It's honestly the main reason why I think both games are still talked about to this day. Listening to the soundtrack of this game from start to finish feels like a trip. It's legit the type of music you can listen to in the car with other people without them knowing it's from a video game. As for the graphics, we have this bright colored, cel shaded style that heavily complements the low polygonal graphics, and I feel it's a timeless aesthetic. I freaking saw a picture the other day showing how Beat looked without cel shading, and needless to say, I'm glad they chose to stick with the style. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I also think Jet Set Radio was the first commercial game to use cel shading, which is a pretty big deal if you think about it, because now you see this style being adapted into a lot of other games. Moving on to the story, I'd say it's pretty straightforward. I don't know, maybe I'm not open-minded enough to understand it to its fullest, but I do appreciate it for existing, however. And I'm not gonna go in full depth with it too, since there are a lot of those out there on YouTube that you can check out. But in a nutshell, it starts out as a graffiti turf war between a bunch of street punks known as Rudies, which is also being commentated by DJ Professor K on his underground pirate radio station known as Jet Set Radio. The police force really hates these guys and also wants to get involved in trying to take them out, which is crazy because they honestly do more damage to the streets than the gangs themselves. Eventually, later in the story, some big authority named Goji Rukaku gets introduced, who is basically loony over a record that supposedly summons a demon, and with it wants to take over Tokyo and eventually the world. And apparently the graffiti of her crew is the only thing that could stop it. Yeah, the story had me at first with the turf wars and stuff, but honestly, I felt like more could have been done with the Golden Rhino segment. And don't get me wrong, I love the interesting twist and how wacky it got, but something about it just felt a little rushed towards the end. And that's okay, because overall, Jet Set Radio definitely had some flaws, but despite those flaws, I still think it's a good game. Like, just recently, I started streaming a playthrough of the game to gather my thoughts about the video, and just like the many other times I played it, it was still as enjoyable, if not better than the previous playthroughs. The road bumps I've had with Jet Set Radio, like learning how to work with the limitations and handle the janky controls, not only helped me learn to enjoy it, but it really helped me understand why to love it. Now, the one word you're going to be hearing me say about this game is more. This game is basically Jet Set Radio and more. And I feel like if I didn't have the patience to learn and finish the first game, I wouldn't have even gotten to this one. But thankfully, my stubborn curiosity persisted, and I was able to see why it was praised so much. I'd also like to add that finishing the first game made me appreciate this one even more. You know, the same kind of appreciation you give Dark Souls 3 after playing Dark Souls 2 in the trilogy. Because just by the way it looks and plays, Jet Set Radio Future felt like a showcase of the devs being able to bring their vision much closer to what they wanted with the technological advancements on the Xbox compared to the Dreamcast. There's a lot more areas to explore that are much bigger and more detailed, along with bigger packs of civilians that your person can just shove around. Not to mention that these areas are also more spaced out too, which in my opinion can make it easier to read the surroundings and start flowing right off the bat. Also, the painting is a little more streamlined because they removed the QuickTime events, and now all you have to do is mash the right trigger on these little icons to complete them. And they also added another button that you can spam to do tricks while grinding or when you're speeding in the air. I would say the controls in Future still feel a little similar to the first one, like the floatiness and restrictive air strafing, but the good thing is that it feels more responsive and less punishing for missing a jump. I also feel like the pacing for the game is more laid back than the first one because they removed the timer, which I I think is a good decision on their part, because that sense of urgency you had with the first game is gone, and you're free to explore the map and just vibe out for as long as you want. And the music and art style, much like the first one, are bangers. I would say the color scheme they went for in Future is a good description of what the style was in that era of gaming. The colors weren't as bright as the original, and that Y2K style people go crazy for today is very evident in this game, and it still looks freaking good 20 years later. I'm also a huge fan of the new designs they gave the characters. I'm a sucker when it comes to those overly excessive accessories and little details that add a little flair and pizzazz to the bigger picture. Of course, there are some designs in the first Jet Set Radio that people prefer more than the one in Future, but overall aesthetics wise, they're still solid 10s in my book. The soundtrack is for sure a masterpiece. A lot of the tracks in this game are bangers, and no matter what, I think you'll have a good time every time you pull it up. I mean, heck, every time I listen to these songs, I'm always tempted to try out roller skating, but I know I won't because it's just a feeling. They've also included remixes of the original soundtrack, which are solid additions as well. My favorite being the Humming the Bassline and Sneak Man remixes. And not only do they have songs produced by Hideki Naganuma, but they also have some interesting ones by other artists that made Birthday Cake and Aisle 10. And yes, I genuinely think Birthday Cake is a unique and fun song to listen to, and it definitely made the playlist. Again, not much to say about the story of Future, other than from my understanding, it's basically a retelling of the first one in an alternate setting with a little changes here and there, but for sure it's more fleshed out than the first one. What I found funny about the story was the last couple of chapters, because again, in my opinion, it also felt like it was kind of rushed, especially the part in chapter 6 where the main objective was just running into a bunch of noise tank robots in the city. I'd for sure say it was my least favorite chapter in the whole game, but other than that, everything else was a solid experience. Even the final boss fight, because I just found it fun flowing my way to the top of the map. But yeah, overall I'd say Jet Set Radio Future is a really good game. Just like the first one, it does have some flaws, but I'd say it's very minimal. Really, I just want this game to be ported to PC so bad, but I think something about the licensing issues with some of the songs made that impossible, sadly. Even if you had trouble getting into Jet Set Radio, at least give Future a try. There's a reason why so many people reference this game, and it's not only for nostalgia reasons. And who knows, maybe I'll revisit this game again on stream or something.
Oh, what? Come on, the streets are in trouble again? Who's gonna rise to the call? Remember, the streets don't wait for no one.
After the release of Future, Jet Set Radio kind of went radio silent, and it's sad because after so much celebration with the IP, Sega hadn't done anything with it since then. And sure, the cast has made some appearances in other video games, but overall the fans haven't heard any news about a new Jet Set Radio game coming out at all for quite a while. Up until 2020, when some random indie company named Team Reptile decided to make one themselves and dropped a true shocker of a teaser, followed by a year later dropping a seriously good looking trailer. And the craziest thing is that it took this game alone for me to boot back Jet Set Radio and play it in its entirety in a good way. Right off the bat, from the gameplay down to the graphics, music, and art style, this game was not in the slightest trying to hide any of its Jet Set Radio influence. Even the legendary Hideki Naganuma produced some songs for the game, including both the teaser and the trailer, which fit perfectly at home for Bomb Rush Cyberpunk. Like I said in my indie games video about how indie games are inspired by other great games, Bomb Rush Cyberpunk is without a doubt a true love letter to Jet Set Radio. And while it looks and sounds a lot like Jet Set Radio, I wouldn't say it plays like Jet Set Radio. And hold up, I don't mean that as a bad thing, not at all. For one, the movement is way more snappy and responsive. It more so feels like a 3D platformer with this level of control. Making mistakes is very minimal too because of this, and it's like second nature when controlling your character, giving you more of that brain power to focus on what tricks and jumps to connect. You also have an air dash that can help orient your character towards a certain direction if you just manage to miss a jump, as well as a boost to speed up your character or perform a special trick. And I think these mechanics alone open a lot of possibilities with the way you navigate through levels as well. I also like like how the devs added more inputs to do tricks so you can just mindlessly mash X, Y, and B while grinding. And you also have the option to choose one of 3 different ways to ride. You know, the iconic inline skates, a skateboard, and a BMX bike. And from my understanding, it's mostly personal preference, unless you're trying to reach certain areas to get collectibles. There's a good amount of stuff to say about the control scheme, but that's pretty much the gist of it. Oh yeah, and they kind of brought back the QuickTime events for painting, which is pretty cool. Plain, straight, and simple, the art style for this game is gorgeous. It looks like they mixed the bright, vibrant colors of Jet Set Radio with the cyber-like qualities of Future. I just adore the variety of crews in the game as well, with character designs that could go from straight, simple, and clean to extremely bold and out there. My favorite rival crew design would probably have to be .exe, just because they're freaking dancing robots with tracksuits, or maybe Futurism because, I don't know, they just look sick. The graffiti also looks freaking dope. One of them even had an art style I recognized, and sure enough, with research, it was actually from someone I followed named Yapiko, so that was pretty dope to see. The soundtrack though, oh man, I love the soundtrack for this game. I remember after beating the game, I would have them on repeat whenever I'm driving around or working out. The OST is basically a huge mix of genres from unique artists that the game actually put me on. And it's not like the devs added these tracks from their personal playlist and called it a day, or maybe they did. I don't know, but they have good taste. I felt the songs chosen were a perfect fit for the game without a doubt. Other than the couple tracks by Hideki and Tumelo, I wouldn't say that a lot of them are fully Jet Set Radio-like, which I think is a good thing because the unique vibe that these songs give kind of helps Bomb Rush form its own identity. Overall, I recommend anyone just to give the soundtrack a listen. It's a really good experience. For the story, we have a very different approach. And no worries, I'm not going to spoil any elements in the story for those still on the fence about getting it. But I will say, while both Jet Set Radio games have someone like DJ Professor K commentating what's going on in the land of Tokyoto, Bomb Rush Cyberpunk takes a different approach to telling their story and actually has you experiencing it as the protagonist named Red, alongside with your crew members Treese and Bell. Not gonna lie, this approach actually had me more immersed in the story than Jet Set Radio because you're able to see the personalities of the cast through those cutscenes, as well as being able to feel the same emotions as them from the events they were experiencing throughout the story. But for those looking to get straight into the action, it can be a bit talkative. There's a lot of dialogue to soak in, but luckily you can also skip the cutscenes if you're not too keen on watching them. But I feel like the devs really had a decent story to tell in this colorful world, filled with a lovely cast of characters and those exciting moments where you can't help but get hyped up with your crew when you win those battles with them. Overall, despite the differences this game has to Jet Set Radio, I feel like this is by far the best homage to the series. It's one of those moments where I just hope the OG devs at Sega noticed Bomb Rush Cyberpunk and just had a big smile on their face for having their work appreciated so much that another game similar was created in their honor. I would honestly recommend any Jet Set Radio fan or anyone curious about the game to give this one a try, but I'm pretty sure you already have. To keep this short and simple, because holy, this is the longest I've ever yapped. There's a reason why this game became a cult classic and why so many people resonate with it, including myself. I mean, when I was a kid, my dad was a DJ and my mom was a choreographer around the 90s to the late 2000s. So this kind of stuff was always around me growing up. All 3 of these games have a lot of love put into them, and despite the flaws they may have, I'd still consider them artistic masterpieces. Some days I would just boot up Bomb Rush Cyberpunk whenever I want to turn my brain off, or maybe Jet Set Radio if I feel like going for a more old school feel. I just hope that whenever the new Jet Set Radio comes out, good or not, we can all finally come together again after this 20-year wait, 20+ year wait actually, and show Sega that we do care a lot about their IPs that aren't Sonic or Yakuza. But yeah, that's gonna be it from me. If you made it this far, thank you for watching, and thank you for the huge support from the last video. I know I said it in the community post, but I just wanted to personally thank you all verbally. Again, gonna be streaming a bit more on Twitch, so if you want to chill, twitch.tv/Nomulee is where you can find me. Okay, that's enough. Thanks again. See you in the next video, and I hope you have a good day.